The night was alive with laughter and music, the kind that made you forget about the world outside. Emily had spent days preparing for her housewarming party, eager to impress her new neighbors and friends. The aroma of rich, hearty stew filled the air, drifting from the massive pot bubbling in the kitchen. It was her grandmother's secret recipe, one that had never failed to win over a crowd. By 9 o'clock, the living room buzzed with guests clutching cups of wine, plates stacked with bread and cheese, waiting eagerly for the main course. Emily, dressed in a flowing blue dress, moved gracefully among them, soaking up their compliments. Outside, a heavy mist had settled over the streets, blanketing the neighborhood in a soft, eerie glow. But inside, the house was a cocoon of warmth, light, and merriment. The kitchen door swung open as Emily's best friend, Marcus, stuck his head inside. "The stew smells insane. Everyone's starving," he laughed. Emily grinned and ladled a heaping spoonful into a bowl, admiring the way the steam curled upward like ghostly fingers. She had been careful to follow every step of the recipe, right down to the last herb. As the guests crowded into the dining room, Emily carried the heavy pot to the center of the table, setting it down with a proud flourish. "Dinner is served," she announced, and the guests cheered. They lined up eagerly, chatting animatedly as they prepared to dig in. No one noticed at first the odd shape bobbing just beneath the surface. It wasn't until the third or fourth guest dipped in their ladle that a strange silence fell over the room. A pale, lifeless human hand floated to the surface, fingers curled grotesquely as if reaching for help. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The guests stood motionless, staring at the hand bobbing in the soup, their minds refusing to believe what their eyes clearly saw. The hand floated eerily, the skin pale and pruned from the boiling heat, the fingernails an unnatural shade of blue. A single droplet of broth slid off the lifeless fingers and plopped back into the pot with a sickening sound that shattered the silence. Then the screaming began. A woman dropped her bowl, the porcelain shattering across the hardwood floor. Someone else stumbled backward into a chair, sending it crashing down. Plates clattered and glass shattered as chaos erupted. Emily stood rooted to the spot, her blood turning to ice. She wanted to scream too, but her voice caught in her throat, strangled by horror. Marcus was the first to react, rushing forward and yanking the pot off the table. "Everyone out," he shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of panic. Guests scrambled for the door, some crying, others gagging or shouting in confusion. Emily could only watch as her perfect night crumbled into a nightmare. In the chaos, she barely noticed the figure standing at the far end of the room. A man, cloaked in the misty shadows from outside, watched them with unsettling stillness. His face was hidden under the brim of a wide hat, and his presence sent a shiver crawling up Emily's spine. When she blinked, he was gone, leaving only the lingering sense that something far worse was still lurking. As the last guest fled into the night, Emily remained behind with Marcus, staring at the grisly sight in the kitchen. The front door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang, and the house, once so warm and full of life, felt deathly silent. The silence that settled after the guests fled was almost worse than the screaming. Emily clung to Marcus's arm, her hands trembling violently. The pot sat abandoned on the floor, the hand still bobbing lifelessly in the broth. Marcus swallowed hard, his face pale, trying to stay calm for Emily's sake. "We need to call the police," he said finally, his voice low and urgent. But Emily shook her head, her mind clouded with confusion and shame. How would she even begin to explain this? It was supposed to be a celebration, not a crime scene. As Marcus fumbled with his phone, a low rhythmic knocking sounded from somewhere deep within the house. They both froze. It wasn't coming from the front door or any window, it was coming from inside. From below. Marcus gestured silently, and they crept toward the hallway following the sound. The knocks grew louder and more deliberate with each step, leading them to the basement door. Emily realized she had never even opened it since moving in. Her landlord had casually mentioned it was used for storage and best left alone. With a deep breath, Marcus twisted the doorknob. A rush of cold, stale air hit their faces. The basement stairs descended into pure darkness, and the knocking was now louder, faster, almost desperate. Emily grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and shined it down. The beam of light caught on something, an old, heavy door at the bottom of the stairs. It looked ancient, out of place, reinforced with thick iron bolts. The knocking suddenly stopped, replaced by an eerie, suffocating silence. Marcus descended slowly, Emily close behind him. When they reached the door, Emily noticed deep scratches gouged into the wood, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. And then, without warning, the door creaked open on its own. The door swung open with a long, painful groan, revealing a narrow stone passageway that seemed to stretch endlessly into darkness. The flashlight flickered weakly, casting dancing shadows along the damp, crumbling walls. A foul, metallic smell wafted out, making Emily gag. She pressed a sleeve to her nose, trying to block it out, but the stench seemed to cling to the very air. Marcus hesitated, glancing back at her. "Stay close," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the heavy pounding of Emily's heart. Together they stepped inside, the door creaking again as it swung shut behind them. They flinched at the sudden bang, but neither dared turn back. Their footsteps echoed off the stone, mingling with the distant, almost imperceptible sound of something dripping and breathing. The walls were lined with faded symbols, strange and twisted, that pulsed and shimmered when the light passed over them. Emily shivered, feeling as if unseen eyes were watching from the shadows. The hallway finally opened into a small, circular chamber. In the center stood a rusted metal cauldron, blackened with age. Around it were the remains of wooden benches, broken chains, and horrifyingly bones, scattered like discarded toys. Human bones. Emily stumbled backward, her scream caught in her throat. Marcus moved closer to the cauldron, morbid curiosity overtaking his fear. Inside, thick, congealed sludge coated the bottom, and embedded within it was a ring, a simple gold band with a single initial carved into it, E. Emily gasped. It was the same ring her grandmother had worn her entire life. She remembered it clearly from childhood, catching the way it gleamed in the sunlight whenever her grandmother stirred the stew. Suddenly the air grew colder. The shadows on the walls seemed to stretch and shudder. From the corner of the chamber, something began to rise, something long, thin, and human-shaped, but grotesquely distorted. Emily stumbled back as the figure fully emerged from the shadows. It was tall and skeletal, its limbs impossibly long, its face a twisted, nightmarish mockery of humanity. Its hollow eyes locked onto Emily, and in that moment she felt a deep, ancient sorrow, a pain that didn't belong to her, but was now somehow tied to her blood. Marcus grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the passageway, but the stone floor beneath them trembled violently. The entrance slammed shut as if an invisible force had sealed them inside. The creature glided closer, its movements jerky as if it struggled against unseen chains. Then, in a voice that sounded like the scraping of metal against bone, it spoke. "You have disturbed the bond. You must finish what was started." Tears streamed down Emily's face as pieces of her family's hidden past slammed into her. Her grandmother hadn't been just a kind old woman, she had been a keeper, a warden, entrusted with imprisoning this thing deep underground, using dark, forbidden rituals masked as harmless traditions. The stew, the gatherings, they were all part of a binding ceremony. But with her grandmother gone, the rituals had stopped, and the creature had begun to stir, clawing its way back into the world. Tonight's party, tonight's stew, had been the final mistake, a reenactment without the knowledge to seal the darkness. The creature raised a bony finger toward Emily, beckoning her forward. Marcus tried to intervene, but the walls seemed to come alive, twisting and grabbing at him, pulling him away. Left with no choice, Emily stepped forward. The air grew heavier with each step, the world around her dimming until only she and the creature remained. In a last desperate act of courage, she whispered an apology, and plunged her hand into the foul cauldron, feeling the cursed sludge engulf her arm. A flash of searing light filled the chamber. A terrible scream echoed through the stone halls, and then silence. When Marcus awoke, he was alone. The basement was empty. The house above stood quiet, untouched. Emily was gone. But every now and then, when the wind howled through the empty halls, if you listened closely, you could still hear the faint sound of a hand stirring a pot, waiting for the next guest. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more terrifying stories, and comment below, if you dare. Who knows, your next party invitation might come with a hidden curse too.